Hello, everyone, and welcome, excuse me, to today's webinar, The Revenue You're Missing, How TruNorth and vCIO Services Transform MSPs. Today, we have Stuart Holtby, the founder of GetInSync, and Oli Jurdy, the CEO at TruNorth Dynamics. And they're here to talk about how MSPs can boost revenue by enhancing their vCIO services using practical strategies and tools. They'll be diving into real case studies, sharing experiences, and giving you actionable insights to strengthen your vCIO offerings. So with that, I will hand it over to Stuart.
Oh, thanks, Delta, and welcome, everyone. I'm on the show here. My name is Stuart Holtby, as Delta had mentioned. I think we've got a couple other folks on here. I'll turn it over to you, but I'm just going to introduce myself. As Delta mentioned, CEO of GetInSync. I was an MSP, been in the MSP space for 30 years. I guess I've gone to the dark side now, if it's what everyone tells me with the GetInSync software, which is a vCIO package, and we'll talk about that more. But I'm going to turn it over to Oli and allow him to introduce himself a bit.
Yeah, thanks for having me. My name is Oli Jurdy. I'm the CEO of TruNorth Dynamics. I've also been an MSP for 23 years, I think it was. And then, but now I'm also on the dark side in a way, being a vendor in the Microsoft Dynamics and business application space. And after 23 years of MSP, it's definitely a nice change and definitely loving it. But that's also why we're here to, because of my MSP background, I understand kind of the pains of the MSPs, the challenges around vCIO, why it's critically important, but also why it's really challenging and how we can work together to help solve some of those challenges.
Thanks, Oli. And I think we also have Megan on the. I don't want to miss you, Megan. You can go ahead.
Thank you.
Yeah.
No, I'm here with Oli from TruNorth Dynamics. I'm Megan Mahar. I'm the VP of Sales and Marketing here at TruNorth. And this is a conversation I'm also very passionate about. One of the main roles that I have at TruNorth is working with our MSPs on partnerships and the importance of those. So I'm mainly here for support today, but if you have any questions for me, obviously let me know. But I'm looking forward to hearing what you guys talk about.
Yeah. Awesome. It's going to be the fireside type chat. Now, I was talking to someone in Florida the other day, and they're like, what? Don't turn on the fireplace. Of course, I'm from Canada, so is Delta. So we're really in the north of North Dakota in Regina, Saskatchewan. So here's the thing. We're going to talk about how to really elevate your role from some of that IT management to IT leadership, and talk about how the vCIO role plays into that. And if your MSP has a vCIO role, how you can enhance that. If it doesn't have a vCIO role, we can certainly help you get there. So we'll meet you where you're at, right? And this is just really about the proven strategies in terms of how to make that stronger connection with senior management. So what we're going to go ahead and jump in. But before we do, I just want to say, Oli, you and I met like about, 18 months ago now? Or I'm starting to forget, or was it 6 months ago at the Kaseya event, right? Wasn't that where we met? And we started, the point I'm trying to make here is, why is GetInSync and TruNorth presenting, co-presenting this webinar? Just want you to maybe shed some thoughts on that.
Yeah, it was at Kaseya. I don't know if it was this year in May or if it was last year. Again, the year is long and short at the same time. It's
exactly.
Yeah, we sparked a good conversation because this is a challenge for every MSP. vCIO is a challenging thing to take on. Providing that technology advisor services, technology guidance is a challenge because you have all the reactive pieces in an MSP. You have a help desk and projects and all the kind of reactive chaos that most MSPs have to deal with. But the key is you have to figure out how to get to that next level. So we got into kind of this conversation of, we're trying to help MSPs solve a portion of the vCIO piece. I like to say we're a tool in the tool belt of the vCIO. You're trying to help solve it a little bit more holistically. As we got into that conversation, like how can we work together to help solve this problem as a community, right? Because it is really difficult. We were both MSPs. We understand how difficult this is, but rising tides raise all ships, isn't that what the saying is? So how do we do this together? How do we share some of this knowledge and help finding simpler ways to get into this? And that it doesn't always have to be some huge, scary thing, because it is a lot. If you think about it holistically, it's a huge undertaking. But there are ways to simplify it and put some pieces in place to get started and then iterate and grow it from there.
Exactly. I love the thinking. So really the key insights that we want to say is, if you want to try to break past that $3 million barrier that MSPs often find themselves in and really get to that $10 million ARR barrier. That's what we're talking about here. And I was blessed. I was successful in my MSP practice. And of course, the ERP market or accounting market, which is what TruNorth really is, the wheelhouse is about, is really near and dear to my heart. I started my practice, believe it or not, my MSP practice out of my father's chartered accounting office, which I guess is a CPA, let's just call it that. And so I understand the kind of the space that we're in here when we're talking about ERP, which is a fancy way of saying accounting, right? But I think there's a real big opportunity for MSPs. I know that this is a Gartner thing globally, $183 billion is what they're saying in 2024, like just this year alone. And of course, North America represents like 78 billion. So the opportunity is pretty huge. Would you agree with this?
It is massive. One of the common questions or kind of concern we get is, but we don't do Dynamics, or we don't do ERP, we don't do business applications, and I don't have time for that. And
Right.
but I do think it's an area that, to your point about the vCIO side, MSP should guide those conversations. They don't have to be ERP experts. They just need to be able to ask some of those basic questions, do some of that documentation, and then having a process for pulling in other partners and that kind of stuff. But they don't want to ignore this, both from a financial aspect, but also they're going to talk to someone, and you should be guiding some of those conversations.
Exactly.
But the opportunity is massive, and
It is.
There's so many clients that need this, everything from the SMB market all the way into mid-market. If you're doing co-managed, all of them needs an ERP of some kind, whether it's more of an SMB ERP or whether it's a kind of more enterprise level
Right.
ERP.
Exactly. And that's the thing. So the MSPs really have an opportunity, maybe not, like you say, to dive right into the whole implementation of ERP systems, but it's really that ongoing maintenance around that, integration, custom configuration that organizations will need, transitioning from on-prem to cloud and all of that kind of stuff. I think there's a big opportunity there too. But like most big opportunities, also bigger challenges, right? And I think you alluded to this a little bit in the opening, is that there's a lot of challenges in terms of getting these systems up and operational. Now, this is a little bit of a factoid from Gartner that says 70% have not really met, they're not really failing, but they just didn't meet the original business goals. And I think that this is what we're focusing in on, is like, how do we tackle these kind of systemic issues without taking on more risk, if you will, right? And that's really what our session here is about today, is just helping people get through some of these things. And some of the top reasons that I feel that make ERP, and you tell me, Oli, if this is really what happens, and this could be said for almost any undertaking of this kind of scope, in terms of why, fill in the blank, ERP, CRM, any of these larger systems fail, is because there just really isn't that lack of real requirements and scope. And then you have that inefficient user engagement. Sometimes people don't do their end of the bargain, and they're not clear on what the role they have in these implementations. And of course, it all comes back to the data, right? And complexity of the data, and making sure you're importing the right data and getting the right data. What do you see in your implementations as some of the key reasons that might attribute to that 70%?
Yeah, I think these are for sure the top three. And I think any kind of change implementation has elements of these. Even if you think as an MSP, if you're implementing new server systems, if you don't fully understand what the client is trying to solve, you may not actually end up solving the problem. And again, then those implementation can fail. Now, like you said, fail doesn't necessarily mean they don't get something or it doesn't work, but it doesn't actually solve the business need. And I would say the biggest change from going from my experience, MSP, IT and MSP, to business applications, it just takes these to a whole nother level. Particularly the data migration, also MSPs deal with some of that too. There's file servers and that kind of stuff.
Of course.
But the data complexity is significantly more complicated. A lot of times there's the stuff they already have is in multiple systems. So now you have to take multiple different systems and figure out how to take all the data, make it into a cohesive thing in an ERP. So you have to do a lot more work up front to truly determine what are the business things that you're trying to solve. And the biggest challenge with the ERP side is actually affects every part of the business. Typically for an MSP, it may affect everything, but oftentimes it affects parts of the business. In our case, it literally affects everything from finance to operations. If there's a manufacturing company, there's warehousing and inventory and sourcing of raw materials, all of this stuff that they want to track. And then obviously the second one is the big one. How do you get people to use it? Is it easy to use? How do you train them on how to do it? So a lot of things that we do is things like user acceptance training is part of the implementation. We want to make sure the actual people using the system going forward actually does a lot of the testing, so we can get that feedback early enough and to make sure they feel part of the processes. So it's a very different kind of engagement than kind of the typical MSP engagement, because you're truly working with the business itself. These are business processes, business data, and how does it affect all this kind of stuff. And they're not technical at all in most cases. So it is an interesting challenge. And when you don't do those kind of user acceptance training and then full training afterwards and that kind of stuff, they will usually fail to some extent. They may get a system, but they're not going to be happy. And then in a year, they're going to stop using it and move on. Well, we don't want them to invest that much money and have it not work.
No, exactly. And that's always the thing is that, and there's a couple points here on this slide too, is that often what will happen is the business will reach out to their accounting firm. Just exactly what I was saying with my father's office. And that's how I got my start, is automating his clients. And if they reach out to the accounting firm, now you're entering a little bit of a risk there, because sure, you want the accounting advice and that kind of thing, but a lot of accounting firms nowadays have your client on their forecast, and they're moving into this managed service space. And once you lose that control, particularly at that level of the CFO and whatnot, you're not really seen as a strategic individual anymore. And you're just seen as the IT guy. And you do not want to lose that control. It's a slippery slope. And I don't want to be a fear monger here, but all I'm getting at is that's happened to me. And accounting firms come on site. I've entertained their whole questions, and they walk around following me with a clipboard. And then their recommendation is to replace my MSP with their MSP. That's their recommendation. So you don't want to lose this control, is what I'm trying to say. And now I don't know if you've seen those kind of shenanigans happening in your practice, but that's definitely a lived experience on my end.
100%. I often use the same word, control. Now, I don't necessarily love the word because it implies something that's not true, because you can't control your clients. But the piece that you want to control is where the conversation goes.
Yes.
Because again, if they go just find some random company to try to work with on a business application thing, that company can easily work with, like you said, other MSPs. Are they going to try to pull in their MSP because they're going to position as, oh, we work really well with them and it's going to work better together,
Right.
and that kind of stuff. So you want to guide those conversations. They should come to you for literally anything that touches technology in any way, shape, or form, even if it's a quick high-level conversation and you give them not permission, but you give them the, okay, yeah, for sure, go do that thing. But now you're at least in the loop and you're aware what's going to happen. Because at some point, it will affect you in some way in almost every single case. So you want to guide that conversation.
Exactly. The fox is in the hen house, and you have to be careful.
Yeah.
And so this is where I really believe MSPs can really add value, and with the vCIO, and that becomes the bridge. Just like we're saying, we're not expecting it to be all the MSP's responsibility, but what they can really do is be that liaison between a group like you guys and their client, and really help them. Now, is this something that you've seen help in terms of drive change and reduce that 70% fail rate down, is having that astute manager liaison role?
For sure, because a big part of this kind of big change is also a trust factor, right? Because we're going to come in and we work in the business itself. It's going to affect every single part of the businesses in a lot of cases. So we want to make sure there's this level of not only translation, but also level of trust. So we want our MSP partners to be in those conversations as much as it makes sense. Now, usually they do drop off at some point, and maybe it's just stay involved every once in a while. But that first 1 to 3 meetings, we really want them in there. Because, for example, if they're moving from a legacy Dynamics GP system, which is going to be server-based, there's a SQL server, that
Right.
affects the MSP too. So they need to be part of some of that requirements gathering to make sure that when there's pieces that they're needed for, whether it's getting rid of legacy servers, whether it's doing things like Azure, if certain things needs to be in Azure,
Right.
we're looking for the MSP for all of that guidance. It's critically important because it needs to be cohesive. And without that MSP, now they're totally out of loop. Like I said, but in most cases, eventually do drop off. But in that beginning, for sure.
Yeah, and so it's really providing that facilitation, the project
Mhm.
management, helping understand who's who in the zoo, right? So it's that integration, making sure that you're getting introduced to the right people, invited to the right meetings, just being that critical component that, if you will, oils the cogs to get things going. And like you say, once it's in flight, what do you do when you're in flight? You just wait to arrive. And that's, what you're suggesting here is that as the project gets off the ground and gets its, if you will, instantiated, that's really the key point there is to bring, and that's what the vCIO really tries to do, is bring that and orchestrate those things. What we suggest with GetInSync is that you really have to do this through deploying a framework of, and really, I know that, Oli, you come in with your own procedures and actions and project plans and that kind of stuff. And we'll talk about that in a bit, but really just an overall methodology to try and help organizations consume and go from where they are today to where they want to be. And so it's really streamlining that process, helping ensure that everyone is in the loop, communicated correctly. You're the one that advocates this change. You're, again, orchestrating the change and so forth. And so this is where we believe a good framework really helps with that. And this is, again, something that comes with the GetInSync vCIO tool and platform, is this trusted foundation that you can use to actually help people go through change and change management. And again, it's interesting. There's a lot of work that was done by Core Science, it's called, in terms of the study of the brain. And just naturally, humans don't want to change. It's because it takes energy. And so what we have to do is actually be, if you will, brought along so that our brains can digest this change. Because initially it's inconceivable we're going to go to that point. So you have to make it more believable. And that's what a framework really does, is it helps people just, okay, if you're trying to cross this raging river, you step here on this rock and then you step there on that rock. You just help them, guide them through the process. So that's what we're suggesting in terms of how you get to there. And any thoughts on the framework here and some of the conversations that you've had with clients?
With every MSP, this is where they should start, right? Everything has to start with a framework. And you can start simple. Don't try to take in everything right away, but start with a basic framework. So now we have our own procedures and process, that kind of stuff, but that's really specific to us. And we don't want to come in and tell MSPs how to do their part of it. That's where a framework like this comes in. So what this does is help support us as a tool in that tool belt. We just fit into this process as one of the things that you would utilize when a client has that need. And so we really need this type of framework to exist to make that process nice, easy, simple. Because obviously, if you just let your VCIs do whatever they want to do, it's not going to be consistent. They're not going to drive the same conversations. So starting with that framework, have that basic piece in place, and then slotting in partners like TruNorth as one of those things is what we need. And that's where we see it working. It can work without it too, but it's really ad hoc. And then it's just that kind of random thing that comes up and that kind of stuff. And that's fine, but it's not a true win, particularly with the client. So having this basic framework is always the place to start.
Yeah,
I
I
would
think it's
highly recommended.
And that's back to when we met. That's when we bonded. The thinking here is that to reduce that 70% fail rate or not meeting expectations, you really have to have that dad talk, I call it, whereby you're sitting down with the customer, because what is a fail? My expectations were here, reality is here. So the gap, that's considered disappointment, right? So the framework allows us to align. and just make sure that folks aren't being oversold and they understand what they're getting, kind of thing. Often what happens with, at least in my practice as an MSP, I'd go out and get the client what they asked for, and then discover it's not what they needed because no one did that due diligence in terms of helping them understand their requirements and what they're really getting themselves into. And so that's what the framework helps to vet. And of course, if you do go out and get them what they asked for, and even though that's what they asked for and it's not what they needed, you end up wearing it anyway.
100%.
Yeah, and so that's why this is what that's trying to do, is avoid that disappointment. Anyway, you did mention partnership, so I want to give the hand over to you in terms of how you do that. How do you create that partnership between TruNorth and MSPs?
Yeah, it's always a challenge, right? Because every MSP is a little bit different. But the key for us is we want to be super easy to work with. Every vendor, when I was an MSP, every vendor at every show I ever talked to, or you talk to a vendor, they're like, working with us is so easy. You sign up and magic happens, you make lots of money. It's just not real life. It's just, there's always some complexity. So one of my visions is how do we become actually that easy to work with? And I think we've gotten pretty close. Now, there can be more complexity, but it doesn't have to be. So in our cases, it could be as easy as just, CC us an email and we can take it from there. Most MSPs are a little bit more involved with that, and we highly recommend it. But it could be that easy. If you just don't have time and you just need us to just take it and run with it, we can do that. Or when you have time, then you get a little bit more deeper and that kind of stuff. So that's really a key for us. And a few other ones is you should never say no to a client. When it's like, I need help with my security cameras. But if you don't do security cameras, you should find companies that you can partner with, that you can refer that to stuff. Because you should always say yes, but let me connect you with somebody that can. And so that's always my philosophy is it's not necessarily about TruNorth. It's just in a general sense, you should control that conversation. You should guide that conversation by guiding them somewhere. And it doesn't have to be some huge partnership. It doesn't have to be anything crazy. It just means have those options for the clients so you know where that conversation is going to go. Obviously, it makes your client relationship better. And this is just vCIO type stuff.
Exactly.
Like these partnerships are easy to attach, right? It just fits into your framework. This is not a big thing. It's just a little piece of the vCIO process. When you identify that need with the client, you have an option for them. And it's pretty straightforward. And then obviously you can make some extra money and you don't have to invest in building a team and that kind of stuff. Now, if you want to, that's great. But I tried to combine an MSP and a business applications, and it did not go well for me. So if anybody wants to try that, I can tell you all the things not to do at least, which would be great. But also for the client is they get cohesive advice from one source. That is the whole thing about vCIO, right? Advice has to be cohesive. It can't be these siloed conversations. It needs to be, and the MSP is that hub for all of that kind of stuff. And it's less work. They don't have to go and find somebody that does physical security cameras or do ERP or business applications.
Yeah.
You can guide them in that. And so it's a truly win. Actually, it's a win-win.
And a lot of this stuff isn't trivial. As you mentioned in the opening, there's stuff for the faint of heart to do like you mentioned, adding accounting to an MSP or ERP systems to it. There's a whole bunch of certification. You've got to have all of that background. Now, this is where I think there's a great avenue to, again, being seen more as a strategic partner with your client is like, hey, you're bringing in somebody else? Yeah, I'm bringing in someone else because you need that help and you need that expertise. So, yeah, no one can do it all. And I think people understand that. And the danger is if you try to do it all, it's the old story, right? You just can't. And you're that master of none, right? Sort of thing. But having said that, you alluded to this, like which partnership makes sense? What parts of that are you going to pull into your MSP, right? I don't know if you want to talk to this, like it's really about that orchestration that I talked about earlier on.
Yeah, because it all depends on what your core business is. Every MSP is a little bit different. Some is pure play MSPs, some do cabling, for example. But if you don't do cabling, you should have somewhere that you know and trust and work well with to refer that business to. Now, you can't have a million partnerships either. It's challenging. So maybe be a little bit careful, roll it down in phases, but identify what are the most likely things your client needs. If you don't ever deal with cabling, don't start a cabling relationship with anybody. But business application is one of those things that Actually, everybody needs something. Now, it may be a line of business, like dentists usually use Patterson, for example. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But most general businesses, there isn't necessarily great line of business software, which is where Dynamics, NetSuite, all these come in, or HubSpot is most common CRM/marketing tool for smaller businesses. But if they outgrow HubSpot, what is that next thing? And that would typically be a Salesforce, Dynamics, one of those. But use your community. When you're going to events, talk to what other people are doing. And if you're in peer groups, what are your peer group members doing? And look for those kind of same partnerships, because now you're not just talking to some random company, you're actually getting referred into companies that they trust to work with. So I highly encourage to work with your community to determine which ones make sense, and then slowly feed those into your framework with your vCIOs to make it easy for them too.
Exactly. It's like the crawl, walk, run kind of mentality. And so some of those things, like, again, what's important to your client and what's important to your MSP is, you mentioned make more money. It could be as easy as a referral, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you want to resell it where you hold the revenue, or do you want to just refer it out? There's not a right or wrong. It's just there's pros and cons. Reselling is more work. You have to do the procurement. You have to deal with some of the stuff. You have to deal with getting payment. Referrals easier, but then you're not as directly involved. How easy are the partner to work with? What you make, or some partners don't even want to make money. They're like, no, I don't want that. I feel it's a conflict of interest. But in most cases, it's really not. You're not making them do something they don't want. You're just assisting them and helping them find options. That's up to every MSP to make those determinations of how they want to approach it. But I think the big one is, what is the strategic importance to these clients, right? Don't add lots of stuff that doesn't really matter. But if it's important stuff, you should guide that conversation. Don't leave it a chance.
And that you mentioned, don't load them up with a bunch of stuff is right, because then they have a whole bunch of shelfware, and then you're ending up having to explain that in 2 years and say, we never turned this on. Why did we buy it? And it doesn't rank well with your status within the organization, right? So you're really trying to help them, if you will, figure out the maze, really know what they're needing and what they require. And that, like you said, the strategic importance to the client. But yeah, so then sure. The value proposition between TruNorth and GetInSync, maybe you could speak to a little bit about how this looks like in terms of what would be the target market that you're really addressing here. I mean, who's a candidate for what we're talking about?
So really, it's almost everyone. And I know that's kind of goes against general advice. You should verticalize everything you do and that kind of stuff. And there's some benefits to that. There are also some downsides. But really, Dynamics is a platform. And then, so there's Microsoft Dynamics, which are the applications of CRM and ERP accounting and that kind of stuff. And then there's the Power Platform as a whole. And together, really, that can solve any business problem, like literally any business problem. So we work with everything from fairly small SMBs, if they outgrow things like QuickBooks and that kind of stuff, if they need real accounting, if they need auditing, compliance, and it kind of, you already outgrow QuickBooks. It can't actually do those things. It's not real accounting. You can write a check, print it, and then you can delete it, and it never existed. That's not a great compliance setup. And so if you think about like manufacturing companies, they need all this tracking. Like I said, everything from raw materials to inventory to supporting those things in manufacturing on the back end. Dynamics and Power Platform can solve for all those kinds of things. Now, some of that comes down to budget and the ROI for the client, but it doesn't always have to be expensive. That's one of the things that we've been working on, is how do we productize some of the things that we're doing so we're not that old school time materials. Yeah, the business application space is going through the same transition MSPs did 10, 15 years ago, which is break fix to some form of fixed fee services. And it's a good thing. Most consulting companies are resisting it because they're making a lot of money, but it's not a win for the client. So we're trying to figure out how to move it more down market, have more fixed fee, fixed scope pieces, like a Dynamics GP that's going end of life in 2029, having fixed fee, fixed scope migration options. So it's not going to cost an arm and a leg to do it. They can do it for at least a relatively affordable price, and having more and more options around that for me is critically important. Because right now it is super expensive, but it doesn't have to be. So right. We made some good progress on that. But we can help everybody from manufacturing to transportation logistics, maybe a little larger nonprofits, the smaller ones. There's things like Blackbot and stuff that works pretty well, and to professional services companies, larger HVAC companies. It really covers almost anything. And we've worked with pretty much every industry, maybe other than dentists. That's the one that I don't think we've done dental manufacturing, people that make dentures and other stuff, but maybe not actual dentists.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say that the Dynamics platform can grow as that organization grows, right? So you don't have to think of it as a super large company, right? It fits in, like you said, almost any of the market categories, from small to mid-sized businesses.
Sure. And we don't want them to invest, say, $100,000 into a system now, and then in 3 years have to throw it away and start over. That's crazy. And so the really beauty of Dynamics and the Power Platform as a whole is that ability to grow with the business, because there's enterprise, like literally Fortune 100 companies using a lot of these tools. And so it can grow with you, and we can help simplify it to make it easier to use as a smaller company, but then they can grow with you as you grow your business. And whether that's slow or fast, either way, it can work. So now you can invest time to improve the system over time, and you don't have to spend tons of money right up front. You can start small, get used to it, and then iterate and make improvements over time. And it's really simplifies that budgeting process for the smaller companies. Bigger companies typically will just invest all the money up front to do it, all the stuff up front. That also has a lot of downsides. So we really recommend getting started small and then trying growing it. And that also fits way better with SMBs. So it works pretty well.
So now just maybe a little bit of logistics. I know that we talked about the framework and whatnot, and then how you help deliver that ERP. So what about just maybe speak to a little bit of ongoing support from a client perspective? Are they going through the MSP's help desk, or do they usually just come direct to you? How does that work?
In most cases, they come directly to us because it is specific to the applications, and you need people that have that specific knowledge. We do have some partners that wants the kind of the front line to go through them, and we can work with that as well. But in most cases, it probably doesn't make sense. It's just gonna tie up your help desk on stuff that they don't necessarily want to do. So again, because of my background in MSP, we want to be a flexible company. Everybody's a little bit different. Again, some people want to hold the revenue, some people want to hold the support. We can work with any of those, but in most cases, ends up coming back directly to us, just because it is a very particular set of skills and knowledge. But we can be pretty easy to work with.
And obviously, you want to do what's best for the client too, right?
Exactly.
In that regard. And so if they can have that relationship that's forged with you directly and whatnot, then it makes sense for them just to call direct, right? It relieves that overhead that the MSP is already having to deal with on other clients, right? And then just like you mentioned earlier on, just really stick with the smaller wins, ease into it, and then work your way up. And if you wanted to take on more of the role in terms of being involved in this kind of implementation. You say you had this one bullet here, mailbox money. I really like that. Maybe you could talk that out a bit.
Yeah, I don't actually know for sure where this came from. This is an MSP specific term, and I don't know if this was Gary Pica or I heard this many years ago, but it's the money that comes to your mailbox and you don't do anything, right? This can be that mailbox money for you. Your involvement is the vCIO and guiding some high level stuff, and that's it. And you can actually make pretty good net profit off of what we do, make it super easy, etc., and you just get money. And so we make our partner referral stuff super simple, super easy. Again, you can be as involved as much as or little as you want. If you don't have time for it, that's okay. We can take it from there. If you want to be involved, that's super cool too. Either way, you'll make that money. So it's just a nice way to add a little extra money. You're not only controlling and guiding the conversation, you're also making a little bit extra money on the side. And in some cases, it actually be a lot of money. We actually had one partner. It was a tiny MSP. In fact, I think it was one person, and he referred us one of his clients. And this is a big implementation, keep in mind. But I think that client has spent about $1.2 million. We pay 10% of top line revenue. That means he's earned $120,000 for referring one client to us. Now, that's on a bigger scale, right? Certainly, they're not all that big. But that's how easy it can be. So that was a really good referral for him. And so that's where that mailbox money come from is it can really be that simple. It's actually how easy it can be to work with us. And then it can be more complex as you would like it to be more complex or be involved with more pieces.
Yeah, you got this guy on the bike. It is really actually easy. I know frameworks and all of this ERP and all that kind of stuff sounds daunting, but that's why we're putting on this webinar is like, hey, look, there's essentially mailbox money or gold around your feet. You just have to bend over and pick it up. And so there's the GetInSync is a similar thing, and I have the same kind of story. We had a partner who had a contact and passed it over. We don't do necessarily the implementation, but having said that, the internal vCIO person bought the software and the partner got $10,000, right? So just by just referring them to us. These things are fairly simple and straightforward. If you don't have the chops to do it, you can actually just reach out. And in that regard, it's like a general contractor. I don't want to dumb it down too much. Plumbing, the drywall, all that stuff is subbed out to somebody else who's more of a specialist. You talk a little bit about identifying a legacy opportunities. This is what I call technical debt, right? Is that really what we're talking about here?
For sure. So it can be this simple. A lot of times when I talk to people, they're always like, oh man, this sounds too much. I don't have time, etc. I would say you don't have time not to do it, but that doesn't mean it requires a ton of time. Like this says, start with the framework. You need at least a super simple framework to start to make it easy for vCIOs, right? Whether it's the owner of the MSP, whether it's a hard vCIO, whether it's more like a little bit of account management plus, what you want to call it. No matter what, give them a little bit of a framework to make it easier for them. Because again, it shouldn't necessarily be this big undertaking, and it doesn't have to be. Now you can expand it to be that, but let's start small. But then some of the super low-hanging fruit are things like legacy systems, specifically with Microsoft, there's GP, NAV, and SL. So SL is a accounting system for kind of SMB market. That's already end of life. NAV, I believe, is end of life sometime next spring, if I remember right. And GP is end of life in 2029. If you have clients on any of these systems, they need to, in two cases, they need to do it ASAP. With GP, they have about 5 years, but they need to start planning now for what they're going to do in that 5 years. And MSPs are uniquely positioned. They have RMM tools where they can do interesting things like, in the case of GP, search for gp.exe. Who of your clients have that? And what's their future plan? They don't have to change this year, but over the next 5 years, start planning, because it's a big business change to change your accounting system. So start planning now, start budgeting. What is that timeline? What is that budget? And when can that fit in? Because there's about 30,000 GP customers left in the world, most in the US. And so there's not enough partners to move all of those in the next 5 years. So clients really need to start planning to make sure they can fit in a slot to make that change. And again, the MSPs are uniquely positioned for that. Sometimes just no, they want Dynamics. Oh, I really want Dynamics Sales, or I want Dynamics Business Central, whatever the case may be. It's not super common, but it does happen. A big one is clients outgrowing QuickBooks. Like I said, it's not really accounting. It's like basics SMB accounting. Once you're beyond that, you're going to need to go into a Business Central, Sage Intacct, Acumatica. There's a whole bunch of options for that. The Business Central is a great option. If you're in the Microsoft ecosystem, I almost think it's crazy not to use one of the Microsoft tools, because they are they may not best to be, but they're in the top echelon in pretty much all the cases. And so it makes sense. Now you integrate into Teams, you integrate into Entra AD, identity protection, all that kind of stuff. So it really just makes sense. But there are some super easy options, and it can be that simple. Like you don't have to go beyond this. I would encourage them to go beyond this. Once they do this stuff, then again, use a system like GetInSync and start expanding and getting deeper and deeper into the clients, but do it over time. Don't have your vCIOs try to identify all the stuff day one.
No.
Create like a plan throughout the first year or even 2 years to where they slowly start building this knowledge for these clients. And now you have this data to start making recommendation and guiding your clients. But it could be this simple to start. Don't overthink it. Don't take on too much. Start with some of these super low-hanging fruits.
I think you hit right on it. Some guys might be thinking, I really don't know how to sell this stuff. Well, you don't have to, right? Like the idea is that you don't need to be an expert in this thing. We'll provide you everything. The sales presentation and education materials and that kind of stuff. We have all of that, and just introduce us with the client and we can go in and visit together, kind of thing. And I guess with that in mind, I know that we're getting close to the end of our time here, but That's the segues. Just relax. We've got you covered. This guy's got his feet up. That mailbox money's coming in, and we can really help you simplify. I know with the GetInSync framework and whatnot, we can do a deeper dive into that. But really, back to that whole thing about being a trusted partner. That's where TruNorth really steps up and helping answer all those questions. You've got the MSPs back. I don't want to put words in your mouth, Oli, but that this as an ongoing go-to-market kind of approach, right? You can help them sell it.
Exactly. So we track, obviously in ours, we use Dynamics internally for everything that we do. And so we track all this. And so we know who the partner is. So if the client is looking for Azure, if they're looking for Modern Work or any other pieces, it's going to go back to the MSP. We don't do anything other than Dynamics and Power Platform. That is really clear. So because of this background MSP, that is incredibly important to me, because we want to make sure this is a true partnership. This is working together to help make these clients better and make their life more efficient, easier, more profitable. Again, it depends on what the client's end goals are, but you don't need to know everything about it. You don't need to understand everything about ERP or CRM software or any of these things. You just need to be able to identify some needs, some business needs of the clients, and then identify what's the right fit. And for us, it's not even about forcing them to buy Dynamics. Sometimes Sage Intacct, it's a great product. Sometimes that is the right option. Sometimes Acumatica, particularly in manufacturing, can be the right. We do a lot of manufacturing on Business Central too, but there are lots of options in this space. And so there are other companies out there that do those pieces, and I would encourage you to have those trusted partnerships. So it's not about TruNorth per se. We are a tool in the toolbox, as I like to say.
Right.
But make sure you have those partnerships to guide that conversation. And make it easy. Don't take on too much. Keep it super simple. Again, relax, start small, grow it from there. And as you get past that $3 million plateau that you mentioned, because I think every MSP hits that. And it's a tough one to get through.
It's a tough one, a really tough one. Yeah.
But it's possible by starting small and iterating on those things, you will get through it. And so vCIO is not the only piece. There's some sales pieces you got to do and that type of stuff, but that's where peer groups come in to assist with some of those things too. But this is doing great vCIO and technology advice is probably the most important part of growing past the 3 million mark.
Yes.
And so everybody that doesn't have at a minimum a framework for that should start there and then grow it from there as you get better and better.
And then implement the methods and stuff. And that's where one of the things I think is a bit of a blue ocean right now. I don't know if you're familiar with the term blue ocean versus red ocean. Means there's not as much competition in the space. So it is really helping internal IT departments as well. So what we're saying, there's a co-managed opportunity as well. Very much a big thing that we're looking at with our platform, and it's very much suits that environment where you can go in and you can be that strategic liaison as well between the IT department and senior management as well to help that IT department bring these kind of services in. So we'll leave it on that note. And I don't know, Delta, is there anybody with any questions in the chat or anything?
We do not have any questions right now.
Okay, perfect. What we'll do then is we'll move on and just, Oli, how do people reach out? Okay, I got this. How do I reach out to you guys and really get started?
Yeah, you can go right on our website. You can certainly contact us. I'm also on LinkedIn. Megan's on LinkedIn, so certainly connect with us. It's a little scary sometimes, but my Calendly link is right on my LinkedIn profile, so anyone can just schedule a meeting with me. Obviously, I'm not involved detail in the process, but I always love having these conversations, explaining why we're doing what we're doing, why it makes sense to do it this way, and how we do help protect the MSP in these kind of engagements and why that's so important. Or even if somebody wants to explore doing ERP or CRM software on their own and they want to have that conversation, I love those conversations too. Like you mentioned, the market, the blue ocean here is crazy huge. And so there's plenty for everybody. Now, it is a big undertaking. Like I said, we tried to combine the two companies. It didn't work for us, so we split them back out and we totally separated because the cultures are different, the kind of work is different, the kind of people we hired was very different. So for us, this made sense, but it doesn't mean it can't be done. And I love having these conversations. But we make it super easy to both contact us and have a conversation, and we'll see where it goes. We're low pressure. We're not here to force people to do anything. This is keeping it simple, having good conversations, and making sure it's a win-win with us, the partner, and the end client is what I drive for.
Yeah, it's so important. And again, just to back it up, a little shameless plug here for GetInSync, of course. Really about what we're talking about is making business technology decisions simple. And so what we're trying to do is often organizations, they'll have shadow IT, they'll have a bunch of competing pet projects and when I say competing, it's competing for budget. And so it's really trying to align the technology requirements and facilitate those conversations about what do we need for an ERP system? What are we doing for a CRM system? How can we overcome? So like you mentioned HubSpot. I was in one client, sales had Salesforce and marketing had HubSpot. They basically do the same thing, right? But there was this big bun war between sales and marketing about what technology, and IT is often stuck in the middle of that conversation. Sometimes you feel like you have to put the referee shirt on and go in and mediate. So how do you get that exposed to senior management so they can see those issues? That's what GetInSync's all about. It's helping organizations get in sync. So you don't have that hillbilly attitude within organizations where one group is fighting another, and you try to bring that forward transparently and make sense of it all. So it's not like you're trying to force their hand or anything. It's just like, how do I solve something if I don't see it, kind of thing. So that's what GetInSync's all about. And so that's the framework and whatnot goes into that. And there's a SaaS tool in behind there to help. And this is where like-minded folks like you and I will like, how do we get what the business needs and really help them prosper? That's really what we're all about. So next steps, reach out to Oli. He said he's got his calendar. This will take you to a calendar as well on just through Calendarly, and you can always book a demo. Either of us will contact the other. So contact one of us. It doesn't matter. We'll get in touch with the other fellow, and we could all get together on the same call as well if you wanted to talk as a group. But any parting suggestions or ideas, Oli, before we sign off here?
No, to kind of echo off of that, it's all about partnerships, working together, make it easy and help support each other. Just like you mentioned, talk to one of us, we'll help support that back and forth to make sure that you have what you need, you get frameworks, and we help you figure it out. But we're all here to just work together. This is why I love the MSP community. I remember back in the day when it was not very collaborative, back in the late 90s and early 2000s. And now it's incredible because people are working together, sharing best practices and doing all that kind of stuff. But it is truly about community working together. And so talk to someone, just ask those questions of how to get started small and simply and grow it from there. Don't try to do it all next week. Just start small and iterate.
Don't boil that blue ocean. Just one cup at a time.
100%. Let's keep it
all right,
simple.
with that, I'm going to say goodbye. Thanks everyone for listening, and our paths will cross. Oh, speaking of which, we're at IT Nation in Orlando. Come and see us by our booth next week. So thanks everyone.
Have a good day, guys.
I think that went really well. I'm going to sign off. I have another call I got to run to, but thank you so much, Oli. And I thought it went really good. You did a really
great conversation.
Really good job. Thank you so much.
And we'll see you at IT Nation next week.
Oh, you're going to be there. Oh, sweet.
We don't have a booth, but I will be there.
Okay, cool. Yeah. I'm going to send you a link. You have to come to the Bourbon and Banter. Sorry, I have to run, but I'll send you a link. Please sign up and come as my guest. Okay.
All right. Sounds good.
Talk soon.
Thanks, Stuart. Yeah, we'll see you.